Okay, we are going to move to Dr. Curtis while you guys work through the mic issue, but Mr. Bolden, please be assured we will be coming back to you. So we'll just pass. We will be coming back, though. Dr. Curtis, if you can.
Thank you. My story begins when I left my office to go to get something to eat before I did surgery. And to do that, I had to go by the emergency room. And when I went by the emergency room, a policeman came out of the door into the emergency room, grabbed my shoulder, and he said, "Are you a doctor?" Can everybody hear?
Yes, sorry, Dr. Curtis. Mr. Bolden, we can hear you now. Your microphone's working, but Dr. Curtis is doing their opening statement. So if you could just pause real quick and then put yourself on mute. Thank you. Dr. Curtis, please continue.
All right. So the policeman asked me if I was a doctor, and I said yes. And he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me into the emergency room and took me to the trauma room. And when I looked in the trauma room, there was 3 people in the room. One was the president, and he was laying on the gurney, and an extremist. And the other was Dr. Carrico, James Carrico, and one nurse. And the reason Dr. Carrico was on his own is because the Governor Conley was brought in before him, and he was very seriously ill, and the staff, all the staff in the emergency room went to help him, and then Dr. Carrico was left to take care of the president by himself. So I walked in, and he had just placed a endotracheal tube, and then I walked up and held the tube so he could connect the bird machine to it. The bird machine is an intermittent positive pressure respiratory help, and it works by filling the lungs and then letting the air come back out. And the way it works is that the inspiration continues to a certain pressure, and then the expiration continues to another low pressure, and therefore that spaces the breathing. Normally, that's about 10 or 15 minutes, 10 or 15 times during a minute, but in this case, it was going about 100 to 125 minute conversions in a minute. So it was rat-a-tat-tat-tat, and I knew the machine. Dr. Carrico knew the machine. We used it a lot, and so the question was, is the machine not working, or is the tube blocked, or what? And he had placed the tube in, and if you place an endotracheal tube, you place it between the cords, and then you know you're in the trachea and you've got an airway. But in this case, apparently we didn't have an airway. And finally, it was a question, is it the machine or what is it? And so finally it got to a point where I said, "Jimmy, what do you want to do?" And he had already made a decision. He said, "Tracheotomy, we need to do a trach." So if there was going to be a trach, well, I knew the shirt would be in the way. So I moved around to take the shirt off, and the nurse was way ahead of me with her scissors. We took the shirt off, and in the meantime, Dr. Malcolm Perry came in, and he was on the medical staff. He's a professor in the medical school, senior to Dr. Carrico, so he decided to do the tracheostomy. And then Dr. Carrico said to me, "Don, why don't you go ahead and do a cut down on that left leg?" And so I went and did that. A cut down is a very small operation, but is a very important thing to do. The reason for doing it is that most people come in to the emergency room as be bled out, where their blood volume is low. And if the blood volume is low, well, then the heart doesn't have anything to pump, and that is a cause of death. Well, if you can replenish the blood volume quickly, well, then that causes a better chance of survival. So the cut down is to put a catheter in a vein so that you can get the fluid in faster. And the operation is to make an incision across the front of the shin and dissect out the saphenous vein, which is a large vein that goes right up the front of the leg. Put a catheter, make a little hole in the catheter, put the catheter in that, and then put a stitch around the vein to close it off and hold the catheter in place. The nurse at the meantime has the bag hanging with IV fluid in 500 cc's in a collar that she can pump up, and when she does that, well, she it forces the fluid into the vein, and so that's what I did. Then, after I did that, then Dr. Perry had already completed the tracheostomy, and I was looked up, and then the president heart had stopped or it wasn't running. They put a monitor on the president, found out his heart was not bleeding, and so external cardiac massage was being done by Kemp Clark, the chief of neurosurgery, and somebody relieved him, and Kemp Clark went and picked up the head and stopped the resuscitation. This wound is not compatible with life. You got dead quiet. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody said anything for the longest time. Then he said, okay. And he looked at, by that time, the chiefs of all the surgical services were against the wall across the room from me, and all in white coats, and they had responded to the call that they needed help. And so he said, pointed them out, I need to tell each of you individually what the wound is, so that you can say that later on. And then he described the wound as about a 3 or 4 inch hole in the posterior cranium. And then there's a bullet hole in the right temple. So he described it that the bullet came through the temple into the cranial vault, created a huge pressure in the cranial vault, and when the bullet finally tumbled into the posterior wall, it blew it out. And he explained all that individually to these 7 doctors. And those doctors knew what was happening and what happened to the president and the wound that killed him. And they never were called by the Warren Commission. So that didn't work. And so after that, I stood there, and I couldn't leave because Mrs. Kennedy was to my right, and I couldn't get past her. So I had to just stay there for a while. But then eventually everybody left, and I went around to look at the wound, and I couldn't see it was laying on the pillow, but I could see where it was. Then I left there and went into an adjacent room, the X-ray waiting room. It was a large room. And right in the middle of the room was Lyndon Johnson. And he was telling people to go talk on the phone. And he was, obviously, he'd set the government up, and he had taken control. And then I looked around, and I couldn't see a single person I thought looked like Secret Service. I couldn't see any weapons that were protecting him. And so I was a little uncomfortable being there myself, because at that time we had no idea what was going on in our government. We didn't know if the government would be intact or not. But it made me feel good to know that he was right in the middle of the room, and he was the president. He was absolutely fearless. Then I wondered, why is he so absolutely fearless? I mean, because if it was a coup, he'd be the next one to go. So with that, I left, and that's what I learned in the trauma room. Then later we found out that the residents and interns should not talk to each other about this, and so we didn't. And Dr. Carrico and I would have lunch together many times, often just him and me, and we never mentioned it to each other. And so one thing I'd like to get started today is that the magic bullet was a product of the Warren Commission that doesn't make any sense. And I can go through these bullets that fell on the, but I think I'm out of town.
Well, sir, just so you know, we will be giving you opportunity to go back to that because we are very interested in that,
Okay.
and thank you for that. Because of previous technical issues, Mr. Bolden, if you can, please give your opening statement.